Welcome back to the Mostly Legal Podcast, a show where we tell the stories of people who make law firms operate. I'm Amanda Koplos, Chief Operating Officer at Sheffield, Lohman & Wilson.
And I'm Rob Joyner, Senior Vice President of Business Development at Centerbase.
Rob, today we are talking with Kathy Scourby. Kathy spent 33 years inside of a global law firm. Now she runs her own consulting practice, K&S Consulting, and she focuses on business continuity and disaster preparedness. And on top of that, she competes in triathlons at the world level.
Ridiculous. Honestly, it made me tired just hearing about it.
You had a Peloton for a year, and I'm still not over it.
It was a great year. So many great rides.
It was the worst year of my life. Anyway, Kathy also has some experience when she worked at the Manhattan DA's office and stories from the 1980s that we could not make up if we tried. And she survived something that I am personally never recovering from.
Quick warning, trigger warning. If you're planning on swimming in the lake this summer, maybe skip the first 10 minutes of this episode. Or don't. Your call, but I'm not swimming in any lakes.
Let's dive in. All right, today we are talking to Kathy Scourby. Kathy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
We don't always go into personal stories or really make you tell your we do personal stories. We don't make you do your entire background and bio. But if it's okay, I'd like to just give a little bit about what you do, and then you can go in and fill the background for me. Okay. So Kathy is the consultant, I guess, owner, founder, and all of that of K&S Consulting. And you also have some initials after your name, which I'm going to ask you to explain, which are CBCP and CCRP. So if you'll tell me what those are. But you mostly work with professional services firms, but primarily law firms, right? In the areas of business continuity, disaster preparedness. These are so many big words. Rob, why did
you're really doing a great job this morning, Amanda.
I am struggling. We leave tomorrow to go to annual conference, and I'm just barely there. Okay. Kathy, how about you take over?
Okay. Well, to answer your first question, the first set of initials, the CBCP, is Certified Business Continuity Professional. Second initials are CCRP, Certified Cyber Resilience Professional. So there is a body of professionalism, I guess you would say. It's called the DRI Institute, and these certifications are kind of like the CLM in the legal world. They certify people in the business continuity world and in the cyber resilience world.
We're just looking at each other like, who's going to go next, Amanda?
Normally I start and then you ask the question.
So when we were doing, no, I'll jump in because I have a question I'm really interested in. So when we were doing the pre-show, we were talking about your half marathon or your half Ironmans that you've done and how you've competed in triathlons all throughout the world. So I used to have a Peloton bike.
Oh my God.
And
we have to start on the Peloton.
We have to go back to the Peloton.
Oh, that was like the worst year of my life when you had that Peloton.
See, I love a Peloton. I don't have one though.
Well, sadly, I'm too big for it. And so it was hurting my knees.
Okay.
And so anyways, so I had this Peloton. It's so hard to do, but it gave
every
me more
day, personal records. All he would text me.
There's some pretty cool instructors on there though.
There are.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one of the Olympians, his videos ran out, but I used those for a while. But getting back to my question, Amanda. So doing that made me really respect people that are able to do triathlons, because I get on that bike, by the time I'm done, I am done. So talk to me more about mentally what it takes to do one. And then how is that kind of translated into your professional life as well?
And that's a really good kind of segue into my professional life. But I started thinking about this. I've been swimming since I was 6 years old, learned how to swim when I was 6. I didn't start running until I was 21. So I did no sports when I was growing up in high school. Well, I played field hockey, but no, I didn't start running until I was 21. And I didn't get my first bike. So I'm a road cyclist, not a mountain biker, but I didn't get my first bike till I was in my 40s. And so I started doing triathlons probably 25 to 27 years ago. And I was running with a group of people and training for marathons. So I've done 9 marathons in my life, but all in my 40s and 50s.
Wow.
I'm a little older than that now.
And we don't date ourselves.
But it was kind of a natural progression. The group that I was running with, a lot of them had transitioned to cycling because their knees were bothering them, and cycling helped that. And there were some friends of mine that were triathletes, and I thought, well, I can swim, now I can bike, now, and I just still run, so I'm going to put it all together. It is not easy, let me tell you that. People have asked me over the years, of the three disciplines, what's the hardest? And I would say in the early days, I would say the cycling was the hardest, because you really, especially if you're a cyclist who clips into their pedals, you have to learn how to fall, and you fall a lot because you can't unclip in time when you have to come to a stop sign or a traffic light. So I would say that was the hardest discipline. I think over the years, I've gotten better at cycling, and now I race at cycling. And so I would say now that I'm in my late 60s, running is the hardest for me. And because my knees bother me and I'm just slow and I've had setbacks. But those three disciplines, when you put them together, you have to really, I do a lot of mentoring of younger and newer triathletes. And I was just at a race 2 weeks ago, and there was a guy next to me in the bike transition area, and he was very nervous because he'd never done this before. And I say the same thing every time to a new triathlete. Always just remember there's three different areas, and don't overthink it. Get through the swim first. Just focus on your swim. Then you go through a transition where you're running from your swim to your bike, and you're barefoot and you're on gravel and it's not fun. And then you get on your bike and only focus on the bike part. And then when you get through that, you can focus on the run. And we would say in the triathlon world, when you're swimming, just say, okay, I just need to try and get through this without drowning. When you're biking, you say, I try not to get through this without wrecking. And when you're running, you're trying not to get through it without puking. So if you can get through all three of those, you can consider yourself really resilient. And I mean, we call ourselves badasses. Guess I can use that on this podcast.
That's how I get through life working for lawyers. Is don't drown, don't puke, and don't wreck.
Yeah. But, so I think I was talking to you both about this before. For me, there's a huge connection between the work that I used to do, helping manage a law firm and working with lots and lots of lawyers and all the different types of personalities, and what I do now, business continuity, disaster preparedness, operational resilience, all of that. But it's like that. You have a gut instinct, and you've got to gut your way through things in a lot of ways. And you have to use your personal resilience to get through a lot of it. And, but I guess I like that challenge. I always have. And they always talk about runners having those endorphins, running. And I guess there is a lot of that, because when you come to the end of a triathlon and you've successfully gotten through those three stages, you feel really good, no matter how well or how badly you did. But I've had to transition a lot from triathlon to more multi-sport. So multi-sport is a bigger upcoming thing where so I do a lot more duathlons now, because for a variety of reasons, I can't swim in open water anymore.
Yeah, we're going to get to that next.
So a duathlon is you run and then you bike and then you run again. But then there's also aqua bike, where you just swim and then you bike. There's also aquathlon, where you swim and then you just run. So the multi-sport is a lot of different activities. So for people out there that don't want to bike or don't want to run, there's other things you can do. But it's my hobby. It's just a way of life. And I've gotten to the point where I compete at a national and a world level, which is kind of cool. So
it is very cool.
All right. So you mentioned setback very briefly. And it's not a brief story, but please tell us about your brief setback that you went through.
Well, and that, ties into the resilience world, because, and I've talked to a lot of my ALA peers about this in the last year and a half. I was always somebody, as I just said, who thought I was a badass and could do all these things and, manage my own business or prior to that, manage a law firm and the people in a law firm. I was competing at a national triathlon race, And at a national race, you are trying to qualify to compete in a world race. So this was in September of 2024. And I was in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I ended up getting very, very ill after I actually wasn't even in the race. It was 2 days before the race, and they had a swim familiarization. So you could go into the lake and swim and just kind of learn your way around the course, but 2 days before the race. After I got out of the swim and I was back in the hotel, I got very sick. I started getting very, very chilled and very, very nauseous. And I spent the next kind of 6 hours just being very sick. For me, I knew something was really wrong. I'd never had chills like that in my life. I could not control any limb. I mean, everything was just shaking so badly. So interestingly enough, it was Friday night. It was Friday the 13th. So who wants to go to the emergency room on Friday the 13th? And that in and of itself was a crazy experience. But I took myself with 2 of my friends, took me to the emergency room in Atlantic City. And I spent the next 6 days there and then came home, and I was able to have a friend fly up, pick me up and drive me back to Richmond, realizing that I was still not better, and spent the next 6 days in a hospital in Richmond and then another 3 weeks in a rehab place with what it turned out to be flesh-eating bacteria in my foot.
Wow.
Which is, up until then I had read a lot about flesh-eating bacteria, but I didn't know anybody that ever had it. And it was one of those things that the doctor at the hospital here in Richmond, in the emergency room, they took me into surgery that night. And now it's becoming more of a commonplace thing. And it happens when you live in and around, or you're swimming in brackish water or water that's full of bacteria. And anywhere where you're around the coast or a beach that's got some tidal flow to it where there's brackish water, and that breeds bacteria. And it was strep bacteria in my case, and they'd never really found out for sure, but they think it was Vibrio, which is the bacteria that really causes flesh-eating bacteria. And if you don't address it very quickly, it goes to your organs and you can die within hours. And I was in, which I didn't realize I was in, a life-threatening situation until the doctors in the emergency room told me that. But I came very close to, 1, losing my life, and 2, really losing my foot and my leg. So I was able, amazingly enough, to persevere through the whole experience. I'd never spent more than 1 night in a hospital before that in my life, and had really not been very sick before that in my life. And so it was a very difficult experience. I'm very grateful to my sisters and my family who were there to be with me. But I came through it. And what people said to me during this whole time was, I can't believe the resilience that you showed during this. And I didn't really think of it as resilience. But when I think back to it, I think about everything that I go through when I'm trying to do a triathlon. It's a lot of gutting through it and getting through it, and that resilience that made me persevere. My doctor said 2 things saved my life. The first thing was that I addressed it very quickly and took myself to the emergency room. Had I not, and had I just tried to sleep it off thinking I had the flu or COVID or something, I probably would not have survived. Wow. And because it would have gone to my organs. And the second thing was the fact that I was in good shape to begin with, and I didn't have any comorbidities or any other kind of issues, but it did affect my immune system. And, a year and a half later, I'm healthy, but I'm dealing with some compromises that I will always have to deal with, I think, with my foot and my leg. But I'm here to talk, and I'm here to be here, to tell the story.
How many people make a New Jersey joke after that?
Yeah. Atlantic City is not the most
I don't like swimming in lakes with brackish water.
Yeah.
After hearing your story,
never.
I don't like
it.
And
it's really interesting because up until that day, I swam, I thought back to it, I've swam in the worst kind of waters in the world. I've swam with jellyfish stinging me all over my arms and legs in the Chesapeake Bay here in Virginia. I've swam in a lake here in Richmond that we call the Goose Poop Lake because you're not allowed to swim in it except for this one race. And you're standing in the water getting ready to swim. And all of a sudden, there's goose poop floating all around you.
I am going to be physically
Nothing about
ill.
this sounds rewarding.
Yeah.
By the way,
I mean, it turns you into a badass. You can really say after that,
Sure.
you can do anything.
We're gonna have to put some kind of discllaimer on this episode up front, saying if you want to be a triathlete, don't listen. Don't listen to
this part.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, my infectious disease team told me up front many times, do not ever swim in an open water lake or river again. Now, here's the piece that I need to add to this is that I didn't think I had an open wound or a cut. I thought I just had a patch of dry skin on my foot because, as I said earlier, when you do triathlons and you're transitioning from the swim to the bike, you're running barefoot. And so your feet have to be really rough. And I had just this patch of dry skin, but it had cracked. And it cracked just enough to allow that strep bacteria to get in between my toes. And that's what happened. Crazy.
Oh. Okay, I can't talk about this anymore.
Let's talk about law firms.
Yeah,
let's talk about law firms. Now. So you spent 33 years in global law firms.
Yes.
Traveling all over. And then you transitioned to consulting. At what point, what made you make that transition, or when did you know it was time to make that transition?
Well, it's an interesting story. I had 7 different jobs in the law firm that I was in, and I never expected to be there that long. But I kind of grew up in that law firm, and I started my legal career working in Manhattan. I lived in New York City in 1980, working for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. New York City at that time was full of crime, and it was the most fascinating job I ever had. I was 21 to 23 years old, and working.
Can I pause you here and just ask, I love stories. What was the craziest thing that you encountered?
I worked on, I could tell you, we could spend the whole podcast on this, but I worked on a case that was involved. They were 20-something kids, 20-something age kids that were stealing jewelry all throughout the Tri-Cities area. So New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. The New York City detectives that I worked with set up an undercover sting, and they set up a jewelry store in the Diamond District. And these kids were so dumb that they would bring their stuff and they were pawning it to get money. And they just kept going back and stealing more stuff and bringing it in. So the sting operation lasted about 2 or 3 months. And at the end of that, the detectives were trying to figure out a way to arrest all these people because they were giving fake names. They didn't know all these guys' names. My role was, when we were going to arrest them, I was to draft all the complaints. I was a paralegal to draft all the complaints and get it ready to go to the DA. So the detectives decided, these guys they're going to fall for it. And Atlantic City, back to Atlantic City,
everything is full circle life here.
Yeah, they just opened all their first casinos. So the detectives, to each of these kids that were coming in with all this jewelry to pawn, the detective said, you know what? You're our best customers. So we're going to hire a bus and we're going to take all of our best customers to Atlantic City for a night out. Well, everybody believed it. And so they were told they needed to be at this Upper West Side bar. And it was this huge coach bus. And on the front of it, they had a big sign, which I still have today, called Goodbye, but it was GOOD-BUY. Okay. And so this whole sting was called Operation Goodbye. And the detectives made me a t-shirt that I still have today for this whole thing. But I don't know, 20-some kids got on this bus, and instead of going to Atlantic City, they were brought down to the DA's office and arrested.
Stop.
And,
that's really good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
This was 1981, so it's crazy.
Rob, hold your comments about how you weren't born yet, okay?
Yeah.
We'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Centerbase, legal practice and management software designed to deliver optimal efficiency, profitability, and business growth for your mid-sized law firm. Learn more about how Centerbase helps you practice, manage, and grow your law firm with modern technology at centerbase.com.
One other quick story, and then we can get to the law firm stuff. But as paralegals in the DA's office, we would help each other. And I worked in what they called fraud bureau. So it was white collar crime at the time. But I also helped out in the sex crimes bureau and in the rackets, which is, all just different types of organized crime areas. but we all had to do lineups, and we had to, like, we would help each other do lineups. So paralegals would say, hey, can you come be in my lineup? I'll be in yours tomorrow. So I was in a lineup. It was a pregnant prostitute who, and then the only other people we could get in the lineup, at that time in the 80s, we were wearing suits and pearls and all of that. So the attorney for this defendant made us strip down all of our jewelry, take everything off, made us all wear pillows so we would all look pregnant and, mess our hair up and everything so we would all kind of look alike. But I was at the time I was dating my ex-husband, and he came down, he worked in the courthouse, and he came down to see me, and they said, oh, Kathy's in a lineup right now. And he said, well, if she gets picked, tell her not to call me again. So those were crazy days, and I loved my job back then, but it introduced me to the legal world, and I ended up actually being lured away to a law firm in Manhattan for money because he didn't get paid a whole lot working for the government. And those were the days where you could make more money working in private law firms. So I worked at 2 private law firms in New York City. And then I moved to Richmond, Virginia, and joined the law firm that I ended up working for 33 years. So I loved it. I will always be grateful for my time there. And I spent a variety of positions. I had, an opportunity to move to Knoxville, Tennessee and manage one of the branch offices. And I did that for 13 years. But that branch office closed after I'd been there for 13 years. And so my executive director at that time put me in a firm-wide role because at that time I was an office administrator. So, I worked with all the other office administrators throughout the firm and throughout all of our offices. So he said, I need you, you've been here a long time. I need you to move into a new firm-wide role, which was business continuity. So helping keep the firm continuing business in the face of any threat. And that's really what business continuity boils down to. At the time, we had 19 offices all over the world, and we were facing any kind of threat from, it could be wildfires in California. It could be ice storms in Atlanta. It could be, we had a military coup that happened in our Bangkok office in Thailand that we had to deal with. I mean, it doesn't matter what the threat is or where the threat is, but understanding what it takes to keep the firm and the lawyers being able to continue providing services to their clients in the face of any threat. So that's how I kind of transitioned out of the kind of law firm running an office management role to this business continuity role. And quite honestly, I knew nothing about it at the time, but I had a wonderful executive director, and he said, we're going to hire a consulting firm to help you, and we will have them for a year. And he said, I need you to learn, just be one of them, absorb everything you can for that year. But after that year is up, we're getting rid of them and it's on you.
Just you. Wow.
And so what was really cool about it at the time was that, I was able to really absorb a lot, and it was fascinating to me, and I really became passionate about it, especially the disaster preparedness side of it. But I was writing business continuity plans for the firm, and I was also part of ALA at the time. Yeah. And so when people found out what I was doing and what my new role was, they said, can you come speak about this? And, this was 2008, 9, 10, 11 timeframe. So I was speaking at ALA chapters during that time and learning myself. And so it was just an area that, I really, really liked. And then in 2012, the firm came back to me and said, oh, and by the way, the firm let me stay in Knoxville at that point in time, even though we had no office there anymore.
Right.
Because my son was still in high school, and they said, okay, as long as you're disciplined and can work from home and can travel and do what you need to do. So I was a remote worker when there was no such thing really as remote workers. And I was disciplined, and it worked, and I loved it. So I commuted by plane everywhere instead of commuting by car. But in 2012, the firm said they had a person that was managing the lawyer side of things at the firm in Richmond, and she was retiring. And they said, you've done a great job with the business continuity, but we need you in this role. We need your your historical knowledge of the firm. We need your, management knowledge, and you need to move into this new role. And and our HR director said, we need you to consider applying for this job. My first, it just came out of my mouth. I said, well, thanks for thinking about me, but I love what I'm doing, and I'm just really not interested in doing this at all. And he said, Kathy, you're not listening to what I'm saying.
This is your job, or you have no job.
And that's exactly what it was. And so, once I, stopped crying, I said, okay, I realized this is what I have to do. So I had to move back to Richmond. And for the next 4 or 5 years, that's what I did. It was management on the law firm side. And I was dealing with partners that were lateral partners that were coming into the firm, associates that were being considered for partnership, all the way through to partners leaving the firm through retirement, which the whole thing, at that point, I was really dealing with about 350 partners. And
wow.
I loved everybody. I worked really hard. It was a very stressful time in my life. And I just got to a point where things kind of came to a head. And I thought, you know what? I'm at an age where I can retire from this firm. And I really thought about considering staying another couple of years, but just a few things happened that made me think I can do it. And honestly, one of those things was a benefit that allowed me, because I had the age and the years of service, it was a benefit that allowed me to stay on the firm's health insurance policy, even though I was retired, until I reached Medicare age. And it was a huge benefit, a huge perk. And I thought, if I don't take advantage of this now, I don't know if they're going to keep that policy. So I was able to do that. And then because I missed and I really loved the business continuity, disaster risk management kind of world, I just thought, I'm going to start my own business. It was a gamble, but I really love doing it. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years.
Let's go to that. You brought up the business continuity. So I mentioned this on our pre-call, and that is that I want to just kind of be very basic about this. Start very basic, lead our hands through this. You use the term business continuity, disaster preparedness, operation resilience, kind of a little bit interchangeably. Can you break them down for us? What does each one actually mean, and how do they all fit together?
Well, sure. They're all connected. In the world today, I'm seeing more operational resilience as sort of the big umbrella phrase. I've used business continuity over the years, but I guess I'll start using more of operational resilience. And I think I said it earlier, having plans in place that allow a law firm and the lawyers to continue providing services to their clients, any type of threat that the law firm may be facing. So again, it could be a natural disaster. It could be a man-made disaster. It could be a technological disaster. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be as simple as you've got a burst pipe in the plumbing in your coffee machine area that causes a flood down to the floor or below. That, makes everybody that closes the firm or closes that office for that day. So, COVID was the kind of threshold that allowed everybody to realize, okay, we can work in a hybrid environment. We can work from home. We were pushed to have to do that. But I was talking about preparing for that kind of thing when it happened. So, that's why operational resilience seems to be like the bigger umbrella. It's making sure your firm is resilient in whatever way you have to. In the world today, two things are happening. In law firms that are bidding for work and they're answering RFPs, requests for proposals from potential clients, many of the questions in there that they're answering now are, do you have a business continuity plan in place, a written one that says how you will respond if there is a threat or if there's something that will disrupt your lawyers from working? And insurance companies are now directing law firms and saying, you have to have these plans in place or we may not insure you.
Yeah, for sure.
Clients are saying, if you don't have a written plan in place, we're going to move on to the next law firm. And I've talked to many ALA peers who've told me, you know what, in the early days, we could say, yeah, we kind of had a plan in place and we were telling the truth, but we didn't have a written plan. We didn't have, and especially in the cyber world that we live in with the cyber threats, that's critical. So,
Kathy, so I have a family member that I won't name names, but they're a doomsday prepper, right? But everything you can think of, and anytime the power goes out, they're so thrilled with the plan they have in place. Not naming names though. So
I'm sure my family feels the same way.
Right. But the majority of people think in terms of, oh, this isn't going to happen to me.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the psychology behind that.
Well, and that's, to your point, Rob, like I said, my family, well, first of all, when it comes to the weather and natural events, that my family and friends call me Doppler Kathy, because I'm always looking at the weather and, trying to prepare. But this is the world I live in, right? I spent years at my former law firm putting together crisis management teams to be prepared to help all the offices of my law firm deal with whatever the issue was. And I would spend a lot of time when I was working with my executive director, and he was right in my corner, because he said, if anything ever happens in our firm where even one person gets hurt or worse, I will never forgive myself. And that's how I just came to understand we needed to be prepared, and it's being proactive. Now, I would spend time sitting, and again, this is pre-COVID days. I would go to managing partners to try and get buy-in, or practice leader, practice managing, lawyers that were managing practice areas. So I would say to these partners, if you got this notice that, you couldn't get into the office next day, how are you going to continue your business? And sometimes they'd say, well, that's never going to happen. We're never going to have a fire. But then as the world has evolved and these bad things really do happen, that's where people say, okay, managing partners and lawyers say, okay, you're right. We need to have a plan in place. But here's another interesting fact about all this is that judges and courts are no longer giving people okay, well, don't worry about it. When they're trying to represent a client, and they say to the client, or the client says, well, we had a flood, and so we're not prepared to, go forward, or, for a trial. Or the lawyer says, well, I can't get to my documents, so we're going to have to postpone this. Judges are issuing sanctions and saying, you have to be prepared. Doesn't matter where there was a hurricane that, or straight line winds that blew the roof off of your building, that kind of thing. You have to have a plan in place.
That's the biggest motivation to go to the cloud I've ever heard.
Exactly.
You still have on-prem software.
Yeah. And that's really why a lot of law firms have started slowly. But I have to tell you, law firms, are not in the leading edge of all of this stuff. They wait. Law firms are traditionally, kind of wait and see kind of things.
Uh-huh.
And Rob, to your question, I still have people say all the time, especially when I'm dealing with active shooter situations or active assailant situations, that's never going to happen to us. But I have ALA peers where it has happened. And
that's a really uncomfortable topic.
It is.
So how do you get leadership to engage in serious conversations like that?
I tell stories, and, people tell me, because I do a lot of speaking all around ALA chapters, law firms, bar associations, all throughout the legal field. And I just talk to people all the time, and I hear stories and I share stories. And when people hear these stories, they're like, oh. And usually when I start speaking on that topic, I will say, this is a very sensitive, very difficult topic. And if you've experienced something like that in the active shooter, active assailant world, and if it's too traumatic, please step out. And if you feel comfortable sharing about, this kind of thing and what happened to you, please share. And I was speaking at the years ago, Northern Virginia ALA chapter, and one of the ALA members, when I said that, didn't say anything. And we got to the very end of my presentation and time for questions. And he raised his hand and he said, okay, I'm comfortable to share now. And it had been all over the media, but he had a client in his law firm who wasn't coming to hurt somebody in the firm. He came into the lobby and shot and killed himself in the lobby. And it was, he was a client, and I don't know all the details of it. But think about the after effects and the trauma for everybody in that law firm who had to deal with all of that. Mm-hmm. And so I spend a lot of time talking about workplace violence prevention and what are the signs and things you need to be thinking of to maybe try and prevent that from ever happening.
That's, I read something a while back that said around active shooters and all that, it's not if, it's when somebody experiences it in their life these days, sadly. But your point comes through. It's important to have a plan in place. Kathy, we have time for one last question.
Okay.
So between the flesh-eating bacteria,
you don't want to see
pressure,
my foot.
No, well, we do have a YouTube. Yeah,
also, I thought we were picking a new topic, but okay, all right.
High pressure job managing tons of attorneys. You had mentioned on the pre-call at one time you were responsible for about 850 attorneys, and building a consulting business with no prior consulting experience. What does resilience actually mean to you personally?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I take what I talked about in my triathlon world. I get up every day positive. You got to have a positive spirit. If you don't, especially in the world I live in where I see bad things and hear bad things every day, right? You've got to get through that. You've got to be somebody who is strong enough, and Amanda will know this dealing with all the people that you've had to deal with, to be able to let it roll off your shoulder and not take things personally. Because in a lot of ways, you can be the bad messenger and you have to tell people things they don't want to hear. But it's all of those things. And I feel like just from what people tell me through my presentations and through the consulting that I'm helping people, hopefully, you hope that day will never come. I'm getting ready to do a presentation for a business continuity conference. And the title of my presentation is planning for the day you hope will never come, right? Mm-hmm. You hope that day will never come, but you got to plan for it. To me, that's resilience. Hope that makes sense.
It does. Well, Kathy, it has been so great to have you on today. We have one final segment that we do on this show, and it's called Pitch Your Passion. And it's a couple of minutes for you to tell us you're passionate about a lot of things, but for you to just tell us something you're passionate about.
Well, I guess two things. I guess I'm passionate about business continuity and disaster preparedness. People tell me that when they hear me speak, because I tell stories and they say they can feel my passion in it. And I think that's why I love doing it. So I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't passionate about it. And to have a broad variety of, I have a lot of friends in the ALA world and outside the ALA world. I'm part of Team USA. So I represent the United States when I do these world races. And that's a really, really cool thing. And so I have a Team USA family. And, I just love that, the combination of the two worlds and just other passions that I have too. It just makes me feel like I'm a well-rounded person, and just, I guess those are my passions.
Well, Kathy, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Had a great time.
Really appreciate being on this podcast.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Mostly Legal podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.
Stay tuned as we uncover more behind-the-scenes stories of law firms with the best minds in the business. And Rob.
Thanks.